I know that for most people, hearing stories about someone's ex might not be the creepiest thing in the world that they've ever heard, but let me tell you, what happened with me is definitely worth a mention. If there is anything that comes out of my experience, I hope that it is this. Be careful with those you become attached to. Make sure you get to know them well before you call each other a couple. So anyway, let me begin. This was back in 2015, and I was 19 years old. Also, I'm male, seeing as most of my friends had girlfriends. That meant I was usually the third wheel whenever we would hang out. I didn't really mind it, but it did start to make me feel a bit sad as well as left out. This would especially get to me whenever I would call up my friends, but they were with their respective significant others. Thankfully, even though I was a late bloomer of sorts, I finally met a girl while studying at the library. In this story, we will refer to her as Mariah. Now, I should mention I am pretty shy, and I get pretty anxious, so it was a bit awkward when she was the one to approach me. Either way, we soon get to talking, and then we exchanged phone numbers. We would then make it a daily routine to go to the on-campus Starbucks so we could grab some coffee and study together. After a month of meeting up and getting to know each other, I finally had the confidence to tell her I wanted her to be my girlfriend. She was beyond excited and welcomed that message with open arms. Now that we were a couple, things were going steady for about 3 months. Seriously, I was the happiest guy in the world, but it seemed that this fairy tale had its dark side. Mariah would at times make some really interesting and creepy jokes. Yeah, we're going to be together forever. If any other girl comes into the picture, I'll make sure no one ever hears from her again. Cryptic things like that. She was honestly beginning to remind me of those girls you see in anime that are really protective of their boyfriends, and they will go to any measure to ensure that no one gets in their way, even if that means killing their opposition. If memory serves me right, I believe they're referred to as Yanderes, right? Anyway, this overprotection started to become an issue when I would spend time with my sister. Yes, no joke, even my own family was enough for her to get jealous. These fights started to become more frequent, and any time they occurred, she would say it was all my fault, even though she would be the one to begin things. Now you might think, wow, this is probably a good time to call it off. And I almost did 6 months in, but I held on to hope after we both made the promise we would never fight again, apart from little things here and there. This promise seemed to have held strong until after our 1-year anniversary. The fighting once again commenced, and what was really the final straw was when she came after me with an Icepick after she thought I was seeing somebody else. Unfortunately, a misunderstanding, and it almost cost me quite literally my eye. Again, why not break up? No need to tell me. After that fight, that was it. She absolutely lost it and began to have a breakdown. She started tossing plates, cups, chairs, tables, anything she could get her hands on. After trashing my dorm, she storms outside. That's where my dorm roommates were just arriving. I had to explain what had taken place, and they were legitimately worried for me. This was actually the first time I'd ever told them about Mariah's temper, and that pretty much was it. She would try to reach out to me on social media, but after making my accounts private as well as blocking her, things went dark. I later found out she had multiple personality disorder, and that was why there would be some days she would be fine, and others she would completely lose it. Why it took so long to find that out, I'm not sure, but that part of my life is done with, thank goodness. I've since moved on, but it has caused me to become more cautious and paranoid with who I talk to, which that in itself is a bummer, because it shouldn't have to be that way. But whatever. Stay safe, everyone. I think it's safe to say that enough time has passed that I feel I can share this experience of mine with you all. It's a story of love, betrayal, and a genuine fear for my life. It's funny because I've never really been someone to follow things online, but when I was told by my now ex-girlfriend that she acted to its best compared to an animation as a yandere, I of course was left a bit taken aback. What even is that? I thought to myself. One Google search, and yeah, sure enough, that's kind of how she acted. Now, for privacy's sake, I'm not going to use my real name, nor the real name of my ex, so we'll call her Amber. This is something I've agreed upon with Amber herself. You might be thinking, how does that make any sense? But I'll reveal more of these details at the end of my retelling. So, I first met Amber during my second semester of college in 2012, up here in Alaska. It kinda just started off as a, "Hey, nice to meet you, my name is John," as we awaited our math professor to enter the room. We talked during the moments my professor would pause, and by the time the class was over, we exchanged phone numbers so we could text each other if we had any questions, or we wanted to go over homework. You know, just your normal classmates talking about school. Over the coming weeks, we began to talk even more, and as we did, my feelings for Amber really started to develop. I thought she was beautiful. Her long brunette hair waving in the cold Alaskan air, her golden brown eyes glistening any time light reflected off of them, and those cute outfits she always wore. All of these little things really made me think that I was speaking to an angel. One day during a study session at the library, my heart racing and palms sweating from nerves, I mustered up the confidence and the courage to ask and see if she wanted to go on a date. Not just hang out, but an actual date. I was surprised by how quickly she responded, her cheeks turning red from a pure emotional rush. She told me she too wanted to go on a date, and with that, the day arrives and we head to the movies. By night's end, I drop her off at her place, and we share our first kiss, a sort of confirmation that life would now begin to take a turn for the better. However, little was I to know that what started off as a fun and innocent relationship would soon turn into an absolute nightmare. About a week after our first date, I started to notice Amber's personality begin to change. It wasn't super sudden, as it was mainly just little comments like, "Hey, why were you talking to that other girl in our class? I thought you were only supposed to be mine," and things like that. To be fair, the reason I would talk to others was because occasionally we had to review our quizzes, and thus we would trade papers as the professor went over the answers. Also, sometimes we would just discuss things amongst each other. She too would be involved in said discussions, since she was sitting next to me. It was strange that Amber was jealous over her little talks with my classmates, but in a way it was sorta cute, as strange as that sounds. A girl who actually cares that I only be hers. How bizarre, some of you probably think. Another few weeks go by, we're still going out on dates, and that little remark she made was something I'd completely forgotten. This time, we are doing some shopping at Fred Meyer's, a grocery store chain up here in Alaska, and one of the employees, a female, comes up to us and asks if there was anything we needed help with. I remember asking her to lead us to where the spaghetti sauce was, since we were going to make spaghetti for dinner later in the evening. We began following her, and as we do, I can hear Amber start whispering something to herself. I wasn't able to hear the exact wording, but one word that stuck out to me that I swore I heard was stab. I turned to Amber and asked her what was wrong, but she quickly scoffed off the remarks, and she said she was just whispering/singing along to the song that was playing over the intercom system. Another weird moment, so I wrote it off. Once at the spaghetti sauce, the woman then tells us if there was anything else we needed, then please ask her or another employee. She says this as she puts her hand on my shoulder, I guess in a sort of kind gesture. Amber flipped her stuff. Yeah, I guess I could have wrote out the curse word of that, but I'm trying to keep things clean for you, creepy fox. Anyways, she yelled, get your hands off of my boyfriend before I break that arm of yours." The woman does as she says, and she then tells my girlfriend she wasn't trying to do anything wrong and was just trying to be friendly. To be fair, the lady was more on the older side, mid to late 50s, sort of my mom's age, so it's not like I was automatically interested in her just because she placed her hands on my shoulder. Not that I would be anyways. I apologized for my girlfriend, as did she, before the lady leaves, and we go about the rest of the shopping. Fast forward to being at home. We're enjoying our dinner, and my girlfriend makes a comment that immediately rose some alarm bells. She said something along the lines of, "I swear, one more second, and I was going to stab her with the knife in my purse." I asked her if she was serious, before she looks at me and says, "Yes," before then doing a complete 180 and telling me she was joking. I won't lie, that really kind of freaked me out a bit. Thus far in my retelling, I'm sure you're thinking to yourself, okay, maybe your girlfriend is just a little feisty, nothing to worry about, right? How wrong you are. Another month goes by, and one day she comes to visit me, which by the way I lived alone at the time in my apartment on the outskirts of the city. Amber looked really jumpy that night, and when I asked her why, she exclaimed it's because she was outside in the cold, waiting for me to notice her. Okay, that was weird, since she never even said anything, or even texted or called me. I only happened to notice her because I looked out the window when I ended up hearing a noise. Anyways, I welcomed her into my house, grabbing her a warm blanket and starting up the coffee machine to make her something warm. But instead of taking a seat, she comes up to me and says, "Why do other girls talk to you so much? Am I really that unattractive to you that you talk to girls when I'm with you?" Amber for some reason was mistaking talks with girls in her class and when we went out together as I trying to get with other women. The thing is, I loved Amber with all my heart. She was my first girlfriend, thus the last thing I wanted to do was break her heart. If anything, I kept telling myself I didn't deserve her. As Amber started to vent even more to me, while I told her how much I cared about her, she eventually took her car keys out, and then she scratched me across the face. That hurt really badly, and how she didn't accidentally poke out my eye, I'll never know, but it was something I thought about. There was even some blood drawn, by the way. Well, almost as soon as Amber had come to chew me out on a bunch of misunderstandings, she spit in my face, and then stormed out of my apartment. For about a minute, I just stood there in the doorway thinking to myself, what did I even do? Eventually, the cold breeze of the night snapped me out of it, alongside with a neighbor who came over to ask what the commotion was all about. I told him my girlfriend and I had an argument, to which I remember him saying, "I hope it gets better for the two of you. She seems like a really nice girl." Fast forward a day or so after the incident of her scratching me on the face. With messages unanswered, I finally received a text message back later that night when returning from my part-time job. She said she was breaking up with me, and I of course asked her why. She refused to say much else after that. Well, I thought to myself, what's wrong with Amber? What did I do wrong? I went over to her place the following morning, and she basically just chewed me out again and told me to get lost. I left, and after that day, as sad as it was, I tried to move on, though I did talk to her family and told them about what was happening. I know I didn't have to do that, but I basically just wished her the best and told them to look after her. They said they would, before I hung up, and I put an end to that relationship. That was pretty much it, until roughly a year later. Now recovered from the relationship with Amber, I started dating another girl. One day we were having dinner at one of our local restaurants. This was on Valentine's Day of 2013, as I remember I bought her some flowers and this really cute teddy bear she mentioned she liked when we were at the store. After dinner, as we walked out of the restaurant and head to her car, I noticed someone walking up to us in the distance. "Is that you, John?" I called back in confusion, as it was hard to make out the person's details due to it being dark. But as they got closer, I realized that out of all places and all people, it was Amber. Now she looked different. She looked older, really skinny, and her skin was super pale. The first thing I did was say hello as my new girlfriend asks if she was a friend of mine. Before I get to explain, she asks me if this was my new girlfriend. I told her yes, and she lost it. Amber told her that I was hers, and then exclaimed out loud she was going to kill her because I belonged to Amber alone. Amber then pulled out a pocket knife and then came charging at us. I now told my girlfriend to run inside and get some help as I stand in Amber's way. She stopped in place and she starts to begin telling me to move, that this was between her and my new girlfriend. I'm going to kill her, I swear. Get out of my way, John. The way she foamed at the mouth as she screamed and yelled made me physically sick to the stomach. Basically, the next minute or two are me telling her this isn't right, as she needs to drop the knife, thinking at any moment I was going to get stabbed. If that was the case, I was going to make sure she couldn't try stabbing anybody else. Thank God, Amber puts the knife away, and then she just stood there and started to cry. It was sort of a mix between insane laughing and crying from losing a loved one. Weird, I know. The police eventually do arrive, and then started to question her and the others who had witnessed the event. She was actually placed under arrest, and she was taken away in a police cruiser. Finally, I was able to breathe a fresh breath of air. You can imagine my new girlfriend was horrified by the whole incident. After all, the last thing she would expect would be my ex-girlfriend to explain she wanted to kill her. She ended up staying with me, by the way, but we did eventually go our separate ways a year later. It was a mutual breakup, and we're actually still friends to this day. It's just now that she's married. Luckily, there's actually a decent ending to all of this. 4 years after the incident, I got a message from Amber on Facebook out of the blue. She pretty much went into details on how she did spend some time in jail for some other crimes, including drug distribution. She explained that she had started using meth and other street drugs about a half year after our breakup, and the night, all those months later, she just so happened to stumble into me. She was on drugs that night, and she said she was going to meet up with one of her sellers in an empty parking lot across the street to buy some drugs. I guess when they saw what went down, they drove away, which she of course only now told me. Thankfully, she was now clean, and she even showed me pictures of her new husband and her kids. She told me they were the ones who saved her life from what could have been something completely worse. I mean, she did look a lot happier in those pictures. She also told me she even OD'd once, but she was able to get help in time. I talked to my friends regarding the messages I received, and after I messaged Amber back, she told me that she indeed knew she had problems back then, but she refused to get any help. She also went into details on how she was super jealous about girls talking to me. Now she had grown over obsessive to the point that she didn't care if she went to jail for anyone who got in her way. As enough time had already passed, and time had healed wounds, I actually forgave Amber for everything. And with that chapter of my life was now finally brought to a close. It's 2022 now, and I've since moved to northern Texas. I actually got a message from Amber not too long ago, and we actually caught up on life. I mentioned briefly about how I listen to podcasts where people share their experiences online. She told me it was more than fine for me to share this story online and gives me full permission. She just asked we change our names. Totally understandable. She also teased that I should label my story with Yandere ex-girlfriend or something similar. Not really a fan of anime myself, but from what I read up on the character type, I guess they sorta matched. The whole obsessed with your significant other, and even going to killing if another girl gets involved. Anyways, the last thing she told me was that hopefully this can teach people that if you have any problems, make sure to seek help. There's no shame in doing so. Substances such as the ones Amber took can really amplify emotions and actions that one thinks of in the moment. You could even become quite violent. Amber is just so thankful she got help when she did, and she is forever grateful I was able to forgive her. I'm just happy life has now gone back to normal. She's clean, healthy, and I live my life in peace and quiet, as does she. Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Creepy Fox podcast. If this is the first time you've listened to one of my videos, why not hit that subscribe button and the bell beside it? That way you'll be notified of any and all future Scary Stories videos coming here to the channel. Thank you for your support, and I'll catch you all next time. Take care. A crazy ex story, you say? Yeah, I got one. Where do I even begin? Let me take you back to 2008. I was your average ordinary high school kid who was on the baseball team who enjoyed sports as well as video games. Basic, run-of-the-mill. That's why I was surprised and caught off guard when this girl in my math class started taking a liking to me. For this story, we're going to call her Willow. Willow was a year younger than me, and she was known to be the shy girl. How funny, because all the boys wanted to date her, but she would always turn them down, saying that she was too awkward and wouldn't make a good girlfriend. This is what I found strange about Willow. She didn't mind talking to me, but she ignored everyone else. Thinking nothing of it at the time, we started talking, and I grew a liking to her. Sure, she was kind of shy, but even I admit that's what made her so cute. After a couple of months of talking, we became boyfriend and girlfriend, and life really seemed to have taken a turn for the better. She was my first girlfriend after all, and being in a relationship was something completely new to me. Over time, however, things started to change and deteriorate for the worst. Willow would become jealous anytime girls came up to me or wanted to talk. I remember one time a friend, who we will call Sarah, told me something very creepy. She told me Willow had approached her one day after class. Willow then proceeded to tell Sarah that if she continued talking to me, she would show up to her house at night when she least expected it, and then stab her until she bled out. Super creepy. Especially when after that, Sarah told me that Willow just chuckled and then acted as if what she said wasn't a big deal. I brought this up with Willow the next day, but she claimed it was just a joke, and that it was her way of trying to get the girls off of me. Trust me, I wasn't the kind of boyfriend to be going and hanging out with other girls, or even trying to cheat on her. I mean, I couldn't help it that we had to do projects together with other classmates, and they turned out to be females. Thus, I would have to talk to them. So little things like that would happen that made my life after we began dating quite strange, to say the least. But yeah, I just let things slide, as Willow was a bit socially awkward with what she says. After all, she eventually relaxed, and about a year and a half later, she's more trusting. At this point, our relationship had become pretty steady. As we fast forward some time, however, a problem arose. I was now going to be studying at a university a couple of states over, and Willow had remained in my hometown, where she went to a local community college. Willow would come to visit during the time she had breaks, and we would talk every night, so it's not like we were truly apart. One day, I was surprised to show up to my apartment, and she was in my room looking at my computer. Willow, what are you doing here? How did you get in? Well, of course I checked underneath the doormat, silly. Did you miss me, honey? Sorry, I guess I should have said something, but I wanted to surprise you. She goes on to say that she had a bad argument with her father and wanted to get out of her house. That's why she bought a plane ticket without his knowledge and flew all the way here just to say she wanted to live together. I was pretty shocked, but not surprised considering she told me about her situation with her dad, and he would sometimes show up completely drunk, as it was just both of them at the time, since her mother had passed away earlier, and they would get into nasty fights. Naturally, me being the loving boyfriend I was, I gladly allowed her to stay with me. Fast forward a few months, and things started to change for the even more creepier. By this point, Willow had a part-time job working at a coffee shop, and I was going to school. This meant that we rarely saw each other, and when we did, Willow would want me to tell her every little detail of my day. I thought it made great conversation, so I didn't really think much of it. But then it became too much. It got to the point we started fighting constantly, and her controlling jealousy had now returned. I remember one time she claimed I was cheating on her, and she proceeded to show me all the cuts she had made on her. She told me that it was my fault that she had those scars, and how I was being a bad boyfriend for ignoring her feelings. Mind you, I'm doing all I could to make her happy, but I'm just an ordinary guy. I go to school full-time, and I even work a part-time job myself. It wasn't my fault I wasn't around my phone 24/7 to respond to her text messages. I did try my best. But then there was a breaking point. It had been a late night at work, and I was returning back to the apartment at 1 a.m. When I opened the door, Willow stood there in the doorway with two of my syringe needles I used to take my insulin for my diabetes. I remember freezing with fear, telling myself just what in the heck was going on. I saw you with that girl earlier. What were you two doing? Don't think I'm that dumb. I'm gonna kill her, and then you'll never leave my side again. I kept thinking, and then I remember it. My coworker Jennifer. Jennifer was going through a rough time since her father had just passed away, and it was just herself. Unfortunately, she never learned how to drive, and thus I had done the favor of taking her home on this night. This was something I even explained to Willow, and though she was against it at first, she changed her mind, saying it was fine. But then, how did she see me taking her home? My best guess was that she was following me, which she then confirmed. Again, I'm just standing there at a loss of words, and then suddenly she comes charging at me, and no joke. In that moment, she tells me that she wants me to impregnate her. I wish I was joking and making that up, but I'm not, I swear. Just when she's within inches of my face, which at this point I was already outside the door, she stops, drops the syringes, and then screams and starts to cry. I can't take this anymore. You don't love me, do you? Well, when the girl you love comes charging at you with two syringes, your love is going to be tested. Crazy thing is, just as soon as she had snapped, she stops, and then just pushes past me and says that our relationship was now done. I wasn't sure if I should have felt angry that I'd been telling her the truth the whole time and she didn't believe me, or I should have felt scared since she almost tried stabbing me with those needles. One thing was for certain, I called the police after she had left. Now, obviously, she's gone by the time the police get there, but I do file a police report nonetheless, and I am able to clear my name by showing the police officers all the creepy messages that she had sent me. A day later, she texts me saying that she had quit her job and was moving back to her hometown. That wasn't before again. She's telling me off and saying how bad of a person I was and that she never wanted to see me again. Well, I did get a restraining order just in case, and after all of that, I never saw nor had contact with her ever again. So here we are all these years later, happy to have survived such a toxic relationship with what my friends are best describing as a real-life yandere. I had no idea what that was until recently. I am happy to say I met the girl of my dreams, and we're now happily married with two beautiful daughters. They just started preschool a few weeks ago, and I'm now working for an insurance company. So that's my true creepy ex-girlfriend. Scratch that. Ex-real yandere story. I hope you enjoyed Creepy Fox, as well as to my fellow Creepy Fox subscribers. Love at first sight. What could possibly go wrong with finding the girl of your dreams? Just think about that. A fairy tale ending where you can live happily ever after. Sounds like a lot of barnacles to me. Yes, I said barnacles for those of you who are fans of SpongeBob and get that reference. In attempting to be a terrible jokester here, I want to go over something creepy with a certain someone that never did leave me alone. allow me to take you back to a time when I was younger. 2015, 20 years old. Your average ordinary kid. I spent a lot of my time at a coffee shop. You might have heard of it. It's called Coffee Bean. Not as popular as, say, Starbucks, but it did do the trick. Anyway, seeing as I frequented that certain Coffee Bean, I became friends with the baristas and the commonplace customers. One afternoon, I was sitting down minding my own business when this girl wants to know if she can take a seat next to me. She seemed pretty nice, so I said sure. For a quick description, here's how she looked like. Hipster glasses, brunette, with blue eyes. She was skinny and around 5'3", 105 pounds. Apparently all the other seats were taken and mine just so happened to have piqued her interest. At first she just sat there, and eventually we started a conversation. "What are you working on there?" she wants to know. I turn my laptop around and show her the digital art that I was working on. At the time, I was really into Japanese animation and was working on some of my original characters. You should have seen her eyes, as she was super excited now. "No way, I love that stuff. That's so cool. And you're even making your own characters?" One thing leads to another, and we ended up exchanging phone numbers. Now, you might be wondering, this doesn't sound scary yet. But wait, trust me, it is going to get scary. Anyway, we pretty much text each other non-stop for the next couple of days, and after a date, we ended up becoming official. We were pretty steady for a solid 3 months, and we still frequented that coffee shop too. However, things started to change when she would make up random excuses, along with getting jealous anytime I talked with a female. She would take days at a time to get back to me, and when I questioned her on this, she said she had gotten busy with her work. She got busy all right, because I learned she was seeing someone else. Only reason I found out was because she left her phone on the kitchen countertop next to me while she was in the restroom. I know I shouldn't have looked, but I was cooking and it was there. Apparently she was talking to some guy named Damien, and the conversations were, let's just say, not for something you want to show your kids or your grandparents. When I confronted her, she told me that it was just a joke, but she finally confessed, saying she had fallen out of love with me. She left, but this only lasted for about 2 weeks. She started calling me again, saying how sorry she was and how she wanted me to accept her back into my life. She went to further say that she would do whatever it took. She even went as far as to say she would kill anyone just so she could be with me again. Yeah, no joke. I sure didn't want any of that, and I basically told her she's better off finding some other person. This, however, didn't go well, as she started to send some pretty disturbing messages. Things like how she was going to murder all the girls I was speaking to, including all the twisted things she had planned on doing to them, and even saying that we were meant to be together for life. Yeah, like I said, it was pretty bad. One day it would all become way too real. Fast forward approximately 1 year later, and I have a new girlfriend, who she's actually my wife now. We were having dinner at an Olive Garden, and who do you think was at the table beside us? Yup, of all people, it's ex-coffee girlfriend with another girl. She immediately lost it when she saw me with my girlfriend, that she grabbed one of the steak knives and came lunging toward my girlfriend, but then she focused her attention to me. She managed to scrape my arm pretty good, and there was some bloodshed, literally. But thank God, with the help of one of the waiters, we were able to get her to calm down and detain her until the police arrived. Now, yes, I did file a restraining order, not because I couldn't handle her, but because I didn't want her coming near me, or my now wife. Anyway, it's been almost 7 years, and we now live in another state and are married with our first kid on the way. So that's the story of my not-so-typical Yandere coffee shop first love. Hope you enjoyed my creepy story. Okay, I'll admit, I've been wanting to send my story for quite some time, but anytime I try to sit down and write it out, I get lazy and tell myself that I'll just do it some other day. Well, today is that day, and I'm finally here to share my creepy story. I just hope it's worth it. To give you the ever so important information on myself, I'm female, and I was 26 years old. This creepy event happened in 2017. At the time, I was with my then fiancé. At the time, we were living in downtown San Jose, California, in a small apartment. We, being the responsible young adults we worked full-time jobs and had different schedules. This meant that we rarely were together, as he worked during the night as a security guard, and I worked during the daytime at a grocery store. As a side note, I was walking back to the apartment this week, as my car was currently in the shop getting work done. My fiancé was using our other car for his work. Anyway, one day I got off of work later than usual and began the walk back at around 10 p.m. But before reaching the house, I wanted to bring some sort of soup because I was pretty hungry. This was because my fiancé was sick and I thought I would surprise him with a nice warm meal. Thus, I make a 10-minute detour and go to this restaurant to pick him up some soup. While I'm waiting on the order, I couldn't help but notice this woman, I'd say in her early 30s, just staring over at me. It would have been normal if it wasn't for the fact she looked really familiar, but I couldn't place where I had seen her. This awkward staring lasted for approximately 5 minutes until I get up and leave. Whatever, just some random lady, seemingly out of it. Halfway home, I pass an alleyway and I notice a figure is now approaching me. They ended up calling out and I make the dumb mistake of stopping in place. It was the same lady from before, but it's now I finally realize who and where I had recognized her from. This was the crazy ex-girlfriend of my fiancé who had told my fiancé, apparently in a joking manner, she wanted me dead. The only reason I knew how she looked was because my fiancé had shown me pictures of her. But the thing is, what did she want with me? Revenge, I'll tell you. She now goes on to say how I stole the love of her life and that I would be sorry for the misery that she's been going through. I basically go on to tell her that any and all business regarding their past was between herself and my fiancé, but she wasn't having this. She begins to curse, and I get to stepping. She ended up following me until I arrived back to the apartment. This was a big mistake, because now she knew where I lived. Now, luckily, you need a key card in order to enter the building. This meant that as soon as I entered, she was forced to wait outside while I breathed a sigh of relief. That relief, however, would soon change when I could see that she takes out a small utility knife and begins pounding at the door, saying that she wanted to pull my heart out. She smacks the door so hard, you can actually see cracks begin to form on the glass. No kidding. I book it to the second story, where I lock myself in and I talk to my fiancé. I couldn't believe what he just told me. It turned out that one of his ex-girlfriends had messaged him saying that she was following his new girlfriend, which is me, and she was going to go out of her way to ensure I was never heard from ever again. All of this in these moments, by the way, which is insane, let me tell you. Needless to say, we called the police and she was later questioned by them. She turned out to be unfit to stand trial, and in turn, she was sent to a mental facility, where as far as I know, she's still there. Now, I did end my relationship with him for hiding some other details, as well as some other personal things I don't want to get into. After 3 years, I met somebody else, and I've tried my best to leave that woman in the past. I just thought I would go ahead and share it here with the Creepy Fox channel, so that it can hopefully act as some sort of warning. There is some really interesting people out there, to say the least, and apparently they can try resorting to violence. It is insane looking back on this, that it almost sounds like I dealt with my ex-fiancé's ex-Yandere girlfriend. But maybe that's a bit harsh. I don't know. What do all of you think? Am I justified with my thoughts on her, or does she deserve the title? Sound off in the comments section so I can read what you all have to say. Okay, for some quick context, I used to work for one of those small outdoor coffee stands you see at malls. I'm sure you know which kind of stand I'm talking about. No, I'm not talking about the stands from JoJo, but if you got that reference, good on you. These stands, however, are very simple and are more for people that are there to grab and go. There are some tables, but most of the time it's pretty empty. I've been working there for a little over 2 months, and this is when I started to notice one of my co-workers acting a little too friendly. We will call her Carly. She's a bit older than me. I was 19 and she was around 26 years old. She was single as far as I could tell, and so things started off with just basic requests. Things such as, "What are you doing tonight? And would you like to go out?" There are also some other flirty text messages that she sent me. I put these to rest when I told her I was already in a relationship and she seemed to back off. However, I had a nasty falling out with my then girlfriend, which put me on the singles list, so to speak. I actually hadn't mentioned that to Carly, but somehow she had dug that information up from one of my co-workers, who we will call Natalie. She took this knowledge to her advantage to begin asking me to give her a chance to go out on dates with her. I reluctantly gave in, and after a couple of dates, we actually became boyfriend and girlfriend. Yeah, I know. It didn't last more than a month, however, as she was two-faced. She would act really sweet one moment, and then turn to the complete opposite the next. I can best describe it as the definition of a yandere. There was one time I was hanging out with one of my cousins who was visiting from out of town, and she saw us at the mall thinking that I was cheating on her. Well, she took out her knife she keeps for self-defense and went up to my cousin saying that she would end her right there and then. It was really creepy, and I had to explain to her she was a family member. The breaking point, however, was when one day we got into a fight and she came after me with a kitchen knife. I broke up with her that night and she went into an absolute rage. It wasn't until a couple of weeks passed and I hadn't heard from her. I also hadn't seen her at work. I learned from my boss later on that she had quit. Well, at least I didn't have to deal with her, right? That, however, changed one evening. You see, I had to cover for Natalie since she was sick, which meant I was given the closing shift. I normally work during the daytime. That's why I wasn't expecting to find Carly waiting for me right by my car. She was literally parked right next to me out of all the parking spots that were available. "Hey, Carly," I said nervously while fishing for my keys from my pocket. "That's it? Hey, Carly. After you broke my heart a month ago, that's all you're going to say is hey? Broke her heart? Maybe if it wasn't for her dangerous attitude, things could have been different." Well, she was persistent, I'll give her that. I told her I didn't want any problems, and she started to cuss me out while confessing her love for me too. "It must have been one of those other girls you fell in love with, right? That's why you broke up with me. I'm going to have to kill them until I can have you all to myself. They don't deserve you. Please, I can't stop thinking about you." She then got out of her car. By the way, I was already in my vehicle when she started to kick at the tire, then the side door, causing a dent to form. It got really scary because she took out a revolver from her purse and then she told me to step out or she would shoot me. Talk about a real-life yandere. I didn't take her bluff and floored it out of there, heading to a nearby police station. After I more or less ratted her out, officers told me they would go and talk to her. I had the next 5 days off from work, which I spent at home scared to death. The fourth night I got a call from the police department, and they told me that the revolver was actually fake. I'm sure they didn't believe her, however, which was why they asked her more questions. After a background check, they saw no purchases of a revolver on record. As for the behavior and her recklessness, they told me I could file a lawsuit for the car damages, as well as getting a restraining order, but that would be a whole other process. I didn't care. I got together with my mom's attorney friend, and I filed a restraining order on her. It was a whole mess the next month, but eventually she stopped showing up to my work and talking to me as well. She was also required to pay for my car to get fixed. Perhaps it was a little too overreactive on my part, but she literally took out a revolver, even if it was fake. I mean, how was I supposed to know it was fake? Hands down, creepiest life experience of my life. Edit. It was during the restraining order process I found out about her second Facebook page. It was filled with photos of me with captions talking about how much she loved me. She had even made an account using my information, as well as my pictures, in order to say that she was in a relationship with me. But one of the most twisted things I saw were comments she posted going on to say that she would do anything to be with me, even if it meant killing any other girls in cold-bloody murder. Safe to say, those pages disappeared not too long after that, and I have never heard from her ever again. Back in 2005, when I was in high school, I used to be part of a drama club. It was small. It only consisted of about 12 members, so our group got to know each other pretty well. Apart from school activities, we would often meet at local pizza parlors or the bowling alley to unwind and just have fun. Other times, we would meet at our houses to have parties and watch marathons of our favorite shows. About 3 months into making the new club, we wanted to expand and try to get new members. We would get some every now and then, but they would end up leaving after a week or two. Things started to get pretty creepy when we got this one girl named Josephine. I had no feelings for her whatsoever, but she started to show signs of liking me. I was already seeing someone else, by the way, and I made this perfectly clear when she started sending me some messages. Ones like, "Hey, we should do something sometime, just you and me." Or even other comments like, "Do you want to be my boyfriend? I think you're really handsome." I felt bad because I didn't want to hurt her feelings. She seemed pretty awkward, but we were all about letting anyone else join our club. Our motto was to always be there for others and be as nice as we could. I told her I would love to be her friend, and if she needed anything, I could be there for her. Even with that, things continued to get even more uncomfortable for me. It first started with her not showing up to our club meetings anymore. There would be some days I would return to my locker and I'd find letters inside written from Josephine. They were pretty much letters describing her fantasies and how she dreamed about me. One letter was so creepy, it made me visibly sick. It was a drawing, or I guess more of a panel of drawings, kind of like a comic, with one of the panels of her stabbing my girlfriend. It had her name written on the stick figure. On the next panel, it was her and I together. Then the other ones were of us making love. Yeah, she drew all that, which was pretty weird. Then the last one was us with kids, with my girlfriend buried in a grave at the bottom of the page. I'm guessing she thought that if she kept sending me these letters, I would notice her and I would ignore her Yandere-like attitude. Though to be fair, we aren't dating, so not sure if it counts. But I will label her as a Yandere since she had those characteristics. Anyway, I approached her on that and she told me that it was just a joke that she'd come up with the fellow drama students. Each of them told me they had no idea what she was talking about. This is the point I should have spoken up and said something, but I was an idiot and I said nothing. Fast forward a month later, and the letter seemed to have stopped. She had now apologized, saying that what she did was very wrong and how she would love to still be friends. I accepted this, and she started showing up to our club meetings again. One day, it was my turn to have a party at my house, and I had invited Josephine. While there, she was acting really weird and kept nervously looking at me while playing her Game Boy Advance. "Hey, Josephine, is everything okay? Come on, why don't you lighten up and play some Monopoly with us?" "Okay, but I need to use the restroom first. Do you mind telling me where it is?" I told her and she goes to take care of her business. Fast forward about 15 minutes and she hasn't returned. That was weird. I give it another 10 minutes and I'm mentioning to my friends that she hasn't stepped out. I now go over and knock on the restroom door. "Hey, Josephine, it's Mark. Are you okay in there?" No response. I go for the doorknob, but the thing is, it's unlocked. She isn't in here. So then where did she go? I make my way back down the hallway and I start to hear movement in my room. I open the door and there she is going through my clothes and drawers. "Josephine, what in the world are you doing?" "Oh, I was just playing with your cat. She came into the room and I followed her." "So then why are you going through my clothes?" It was true, my cat Luna was in the room, but she wasn't in my drawers. She apologizes, but I tell her she needs to leave now. She does, and all my friends think this activity was very bizarre. Things wouldn't get better from here. She would text me almost on a nightly basis, saying how she was sorry and how she wanted to still be in my life. I would have agreed if it wasn't for the fact that she showed up to my house uninvited. You see, I'd been studying for exams, and this is when I heard a knock on my window. I opened the curtain, and there she is, staring back at me through the darkness. "Josephine, what are you doing outside my window?" "I just came to see if you were home. I wanted to talk to you." "Now isn't a good time, Josephine. You need to leave. This is ridiculous. How would you like it if somebody showed up to your house when you're home alone?" "I'm sorry. It's just that I really like you. Are you sure you don't want to be my boyfriend? Maybe if I get that girlfriend of yours out of the picture, then you'll like me. Josephine, for the last time, I just want to be friends. I already made that perfectly clear. This needs to stop." I pretty much did all I could to ignore her at this point, and I told my friends. Thankfully, I would be graduating in about a month, so I wouldn't have to see her anymore. That's how it remained, for about a year. Out of the blue, I got a message on my MySpace, and it was Josephine. She pretty much told me that if I didn't talk to her or pay attention, she would do something so bad that it would show up in the local news. This was when I finally told the police, and they looked into it. It turned out that she planned to show up to my girlfriend's house with a gun, and well, you can just imagine the rest. Safe to say, she was put in jail, and I never heard from her ever again.
Hey there, creepy fox. Before I begin, I just want to say, I found your channel after listening to some of your Yandere stories videos. It's just crazy to think I had no idea what that was. And after watching some of your videos on the theme, I couldn't help but think how that character type, if you will, matched an ex-girlfriend of mine, who to this day I have never forgotten. You see, as I sit here and write this out to you, I truly think back and wonder, what was I thinking? I mean, who knew that meeting my so-called love was going to lead to a series of events that would forever change my perspective of life itself? Back then, in the year 2003, I was a young and naive 24-year-old college student. I was in my second to last semester of college, studying biology. And during one of my trips to the library, I would meet her. A shy girl, cute with short blonde hair, blue eyes, glasses, and a smile that read, "Hello, nice to meet you." She sat in the corner of the library all by herself, as groups of students in their so-called cliques studied together and laughed alongside the silly jokes only college students would find amusing. I went up to this lonely girl, seeing as all the other tables were full, and I asked if I could take a seat with her. She said it was fine, and after a couple of minutes she asked me what I was studying for. This led to a small conversation, and after about 45 minutes, she left. The next day I went back to the library to study, and there she was. Only this time, she was joined by one of her friends. Cute, just like this girl. Anyways, She waved over to me, and I excitedly went to sit with them, with a dumb smile written across my face. I remember the first thing I overheard her female friend say as I approached them was something along the lines of, "Oh, is he your boyfriend?" The girl, which in my retelling we will refer to as Jessica, and as my ex, blushed and told her friend to keep her voice down. At any rate, these little so-called study dates, as I look back and refer to them as, continued for about a week, and during that time period I started to grow feelings for Jessica. She was just like me, shy, albeit confident once you got to know her. In fact, I got to know her so well that after about 3 weeks we went on our first date. That led to many more, and soon we made it official. We became boyfriend and girlfriend. What a time it was to be alive, I would tell myself every morning, as we'd meet up for coffee and hold hands and smile. It wasn't too long after that initial lovey-dovey period, however, that I would truly get to know Jessica's personality. You see, any time I wasn't with her, she would want to know where I was and who I was with. Even if I was spending time with my grandma, she'd get mad, and she'd say I should be hanging out with her instead. These little things I wrote off as just her joking manner. Finally, however, the final straw was when we had a falling out one evening, when she thought my cousin, female, who she hadn't met before, was some sort of secret lover of mine that I hid. She told her and myself a lot of bad things that I believe I truly can't repeat here. So I'll just say it was enough to question the relationship. We took a break after that, and after a bit of on and off, we broke up 6 months into it. How I thought that was going to be the end of the story. Jessica would move on, and I would too. And so it seemed. That was, until a year later, now graduated and working for a laboratory. This was when I met another girl, who, spoiler alert, is my wife to this day. And in this story, we're going to refer to her as Amelia. We hit it off almost immediately, and just like my previous relationship, we became official about 2 to 3 weeks later. But right away, the stark differences could be noticed. Amelia wasn't needy, didn't question me on strange and bizarre things, and best of all, was polite and respectful. I treated her, and I continued to treat her the same way back. Nonetheless, after a year, she moved in with me, since I had just purchased my own house, thanks in part to the help of my wonderful parents, and we started to live our normal adult lives. We'd go out on dates, visit the family, and go for strolls in the park. Fast forward to an evening, and we're out celebrating my wife getting a promotion. Outback Steakhouse. Both are our favorites. We sat at one of the tables next to the window that overlooked the street, as you could hear the hustle and bustle of cars pass by, as music played over the speakers. While we started on our appetizers, she walked over to us. No, not a waitress, not a manager, and definitely not a friend. It was Jessica, and she looked just the same as she did before, only now her hair was a bit longer. Now, Amelia knew about Jessica and had talked about her a couple of times before, so she too was caught off guard by her sudden appearance. I remember the first thing she did was ask me how I was doing, and if I missed her. I guess she didn't get the clue I was with my now future wife. I told her I was doing okay and that I wished her well, and as soon as Amelia was about to say something, Jessica snapped. "Was I talking to you?" I still remember Jessica yelling to Amelia, as my wife is surprised and is starting to get visibly upset. I tell Jessica, now going from calm and collective to annoyed and flustered, that she needs to leave, but she says that she wants me to give her another chance. It wasn't going to happen, I told her. What she does after that was truly out of the ordinary. She grabs one of the butter knives at our table and then proceeds to drive it right into the bread. By this point, a waiter comes over to us and is asking if everything is okay. Not that the eyes from all the other patrons wasn't making this awkward. Jessica ends up leaving, but to this day I'll never forget what she muttered under her breath. "Just wait. You'll see what happens." Jessica then returns to another table, where for the first time, I see her mom and dad, who I haven't spoken to since we broke up. Well, let's just say we cut our dinner short, and we left opting to get takeout instead. Now, yeah, I felt really bad. I couldn't stop cursing at myself for allowing this to happen. But Amelia, bless her heart, told me it wasn't my fault, as we had no idea she was going to be at that Outback Steakhouse. She had a point, but I still felt guilty. So now we fast forward roughly a week after our dinner was spoiled. It's a weekend evening. Amelia and I had just finished grocery shopping, and we're returning back home, excited to make some popcorn and watch some movies. As we pulled up into the driveway and start to grab the groceries from the back seats, our elderly neighbor, Maggie, comes over and asks us if we could help her with reaching the beans that are up high in the kitchen cabinets. Normally, her son would have helped her, but he was out working late. My wife offered to assist her as I head into her home to begin the process of unpacking everything. But right away, something seemed off as I put my hand on the door handle and hear the sound of the front door screech. Run was all my brain was telling me to do. I couldn't really explain it to you, but it's like my sixth sense was telling me something was seriously wrong here, and I was in grave danger. I blamed this on my paranoia and walked over to the kitchen nonetheless. This was when I noticed something. There was a cold breeze sweeping through the room. Bingo. The back glass sliding door was left open just a hair. Now, it does lock, but it wasn't exactly the greatest door. You see, with enough effort, it can be opened. I promise. This is important for all of you to know. So I start to put the perishables inside the refrigerator, and it's now I finally tell myself I should go use the restroom, as I've been holding it in for the past 15 minutes. I head upstairs, since that's where the bathroom is, but I head to my room first so I could grab my charger for my phone, which is lying peacefully on the dresser, which faces our bed. Just as I reach for it, I hear something opening, and I turn back to look, and in my absolute unbelief, I'm left dumbfounded, because standing there is Jessica, and she's got a knife from my kitchen. Time seemed to have moved into slow motion, as my immediate thought was I needed to run, and I didn't question these motives. I book it toward the door, as Jessica exits the closet she was hiding in, and begins to chase me down the hallway, telling me I was going to pay for breaking her heart. I then proceeded to jump out the front door, just as Amelia is walking back to our porch. I grab her arm, and I usher her over to our neighbor Maggie's home, as we lock ourselves in place, and proceed to call the police. All the while, Jessica is screaming, losing it, and asking me to forgive her and accept her back. Cops did get there about 5 to 7 minutes later, and after a bit of debrief, my wife and I are able to get ourselves cleared as Jessica is taken away in the back of the police cruiser. I proceeded to file a legal dispute, and I got a restraining order placed against Jessica. She wasn't allowed near me, nor Amelia. Thank goodness that after this nightmare, which seemed to have gone on forever, finally it came to an end, and Amelia and I returned to a somewhat normal and peaceful life. We ended up moving out of that house a year later, across the country, after I was offered a better job, and we left that old life behind. It's been 15 years that this took place. Amelia and I, as I mentioned earlier, are now married. We have 2 beautiful girls, and they are the love of our lives. Alongside them, we live with our 2 wonderful Newfoundlands, and we haven't had any sort of problems and issues since. As for Jessica, the last thing I ever heard about her was that she ended up getting married and moved to Tennessee or something. I really don't care, to be honest. I'm just glad that she appears to have finally gotten her life turned around. It's just a shame I was the one who went through her rage. By the way, Remember how I said the back glass sliding door being able to be opened was important? Well, how do you think she got in order to hide and wait for me? Yup, same door. So, that's the end to my submission. I hope you all got a kick out of it, as much as I did writing this down and sharing it with one of my favorite narrators, the Creepy Fox. Blessings to you all. Let's make 2021 our year. Just to quickly preface my story, this is coming from a female, and it's from the year 2011. At that time, I had just broken up with my boyfriend of 2 years, and I was at a low point in my life. I didn't really want to see any of my friends, and I just opted to go back to my dorm as soon as my classes were over. My roommate, Ellie, noticed the change in my behavior, and she was the one who encouraged me to go out more. In a way, it was a blessing, but it was also a curse. You see, a couple of days before Halloween at a party, Ellie introduced me to a friend of hers, who we're going to call Josh. He was a handsome fellow, tall and medium built, blue eyes, brown hair, a light stubble for facial hair, and a really nice smile. Ellie had mentioned that he himself had gotten out of a toxic relationship, and he was looking to make some friends. And at first, that's how things were. We started off just talking about common interests, as we both loved art and running. Every morning we would meet up at 6 a.m., and we'd go for a 2-mile run around the campus before going about our daily lives. During our breaks, we would meet up and grab food, and then we would sit in the school arboretum and draw while listening to music. How sad, because for all the negative things that would happen, I really missed those peaceful afternoons at the arboretum, as you could hear the birds chirping and feel the wind press against your cheeks. Eventually, he asked me out, and I of course excitedly said yes, as my confidence had now more or less returned. Fast forward to about 2 weeks after we officially started dating. I'm on Instagram scrolling through my feed and commenting on friends' posts, when suddenly, I notice a notification for Facebook. I exit Instagram and hop on over to Facebook, and it's a message from this random girl I've never met before. Essentially, the message said that they were my boyfriend's girlfriend, and that I wasn't allowed to be with them, because she was his. Naturally, all the alarm bells are going off in my head, and I'm wondering what kind of sick joke this could possibly be. In that moment, something clicked in my head, and I recall Josh telling me about an ex-girlfriend that he had. And this was something that I confronted him about, and he then proceeded to break down and explain himself. Apparently, the reason he had broken up with that girl was because of how toxic the relationship was. I guess she was the very paranoid and clingy type. She even once threw a knife in his general direction, missing him by just a few inches, as it got stuck in the wall next to him. The crazy part was there was no explanation for it. She just went mad. I know looking back that this was pretty bad news, and I should have really thought about things more. But I really loved Josh, and he loved me. He assured me and swore left and right that he would never do anything to hurt me. And that girl who messaged me was no longer a part of his life. Well, what do, you might ask? I proceed to block her, and that seems to work as there's no more further contact. But things aren't over just yet. They would come to a head a month later. It was a movie night, and Josh's parents are away for the weekend. I'd gone over to his place to not only accompany him, but to get away from the busy and annoying life of the dorms. There we were, at around 10 p.m., sitting on the couch, watching comedy movies, and having ourselves laughs, when all of a sudden, we hear what sounds like scratching at a door. Josh turned the volume down, and for the first few seconds, we don't hear anything. We assume it was from the movie, but as Josh is about to turn up the volume, we hear scratching again. This alarmed Josh and I, as he gets up and heads towards the source of the noise to investigate, as I follow closely behind him. The noise leads us towards the kitchen back door. and at first we can see this hooded figure attempting to open the door. We thought it was a home burglar, but we would be wrong when Josh turns on the back porch light. To our surprise, it was a girl, and not just any girl. It's Josh's ex, and she's got a knife. I let out a scream as through the window, Josh asks her what she was doing and why she was armed with a blade. She proceeds to cry and laugh maniacally, and then starts banging on the door, saying to let her in so that she could, from my best recollection, cut me up into bit-sized pieces. I nearly had a panic attack as my body went cold seeing her, as she then started to kick at the door with all of her might. I immediately phoned for the police, as Josh is doing all he can to get her to calm down. However, during the phone call, his ex says that she was going to go after Josh too, make him pay for all the heartbreak he had caused her. It's just so scary looking back and thinking how she pretty much looked as if she was possessed. And I'm not trying to sound mean, but that's the best way I could describe it. In any case, the cops arrived just as she walked off the property, and we can hear the officers tell her to drop the knife. I proceed to run over to the front living room alongside Josh, and we see through the window as she tosses the blade into the bush, and then they go and handcuff her. The cops ended up questioning Josh and I extensively, since the ex kept saying we were in the wrong. But when all was said and done, we were cleared. Unfortunately, for myself and Josh, we had a falling out a couple of weeks after that incident, after it resolved itself. It started as a break, but it ultimately ended on a mutual level. I just couldn't take it after all that drama I was put through, which really affected my mind. Since then, I've moved on, bought a home, and I've married a wonderful man who I love very much. I occasionally check up on Josh a couple of times a year, and he's doing great. He himself also got married, and he has 2 beautiful boys. I actually messaged him before writing this, and I asked if it was okay to share, and he was cool about it. He even helped me with remembering some of the important details.
For context, this story is from the perspective of a 23-year-old male, and it's a story about an ex of mine. So, many years ago I worked for a coffee shop. That, funny enough, started with me going almost every single day as a patron, as I studied for college courses on my laptop. Anyways, after the owner overheard me talking to a friend about how I was looking for work one afternoon, he gave me a position. At first things were fine. I worked Thursday through Sunday, in the evenings as a barista, while during the week I went to school like normal. After about a month of my employment, one of the baristas left as she was moving out of state, which meant my boss was looking to hire someone new. We got someone new within the week, a female barista, aged 20, who in this story I'm going to refer as Kayla. She was very sweet and, just like myself, enjoyed all things anime. You should have seen the smile across her face when we met, and she saw the little Pikachu pin I had on my apron, alongside my Goku pin. During the following weeks, we would talk about all things anime, including our favorite series, characters, and all those fun quirks. Soon enough, I found out through my coworker Brian that Kayla had a crush on me. Little did she know, I did as well. But we were both pretty shy people. We hadn't had the courage to tell each other about our feelings. Now, I'll save you the trouble and just skip to it. We became boyfriend and girlfriend, and we were as happy as could be. Of course, we had to keep it under wraps while at work, since most places don't like when you date coworkers. A lot of times you hear stories of how couples break up, which leads to a very awkward situation when both of them are at the same job. At any rate, we became more and more attached like glue as time went on. Going to the movies, going shopping, typical boyfriend and girlfriend activities. The only thing is that I slowly started to notice something about Kayla that was beginning to raise some alarms. Anytime I had talked to a girl, whether it be a customer at a coffee shop or when we're out together, Kayla would get mad if she saw me. And I'm not talking about what you might expect from a typical relationship. She would not only yell at me and call me all these names, but she would say that if she ever found me talking to a girl behind her back, things were going to end really badly for not just me, but my family. Now, when I heard her first say that, I was a bit shocked, but I was blinded by her love. I didn't really bat an eye, other than just awkwardly laugh it off as some sick and complete joke. Things would come to a head one afternoon when it's just myself, Kayla, and the owner working at the coffee shop. The owner was sitting outside on the patio talking to some friends, while Kayla and I were helping out the customers. At one point, Kayla goes into the back room to use the restroom, and I'm just standing there catching a break, after getting hit with the evening rush hour. After about 3 minutes of a breather, a woman, early 30s, wearing business casual, walks in and begins asking me what my favorite drink was. She told me she was new in town and this was the first coffee shop she decided to come into. So I gave her my recommendation as we talked for a minute. And just as my girlfriend walked out of the back room, this woman says something to me in a flirtatious manner that would light a fuse in Kayla. "You're a very kind and handsome young man. Are you single by any chance?" she more or less said. Kayla snapped. Overhearing this statement, I turned around and she yelled at the woman as she proceeded to grab a piping hot pot of coffee and throws it in the direction of the woman. Thank goodness it missed and instead fell on the ground. It still stained her shoes and pants, however. Kayla then flies over the countertop and pushes the woman, who then falls into a display of coffee. The owner happens to see this through the window and comes running in with his friends. As I'm trying to stop my girlfriend from tearing this woman to shreds, Kayla actually bit my arm and then scratched my face, as she then turns her attention back to the woman and told her that if she ever saw her again, the hot coffee was going to be the least of her troubles. The cops were called, and after a lengthy apology from both Kayla and our owner, the woman decides not to press any charges. However, Kayla wasn't out of the trouble just yet. She was fired after the police left. What was I to say? I stayed silent, and later that night, Kayla apologized for snapping at me and told me it would never happen again. Things went downhill after that incident, as the relationship got even more toxic. Fast forward to final season, I have to do a film project with some classmates. This required me to spend more time with them and less with my girlfriend, which of course she didn't appreciate. Now, I was always open with her, so when I told her I'd be going to film, she was surprisingly calm. She just asked if there was any girls, and I was to let her know, as if that's not toxic enough. I told her it was just guys, which was true, and she seemed to calm down. About an hour later, I'm on campus and we're goofing around, adding to our ever-growing list of blooper reels as we try to film. As we're working, a group of classmates, all female, walk over to the group and ask if they can join in on our shenanigans. We agree, since at the time, we didn't think much of it. And not even 30 seconds later, I see someone running over to us from behind a tree. It was Kayla, and the look on her face said the whole story. She was beyond angry. Best I could compare it to be a yandere you might see in an anime. She proceeded to jump in front of me. Then, as if it couldn't get any worse, takes out a box cutter and starts telling the girls to leave, or she was going to reach her breaking point. The girls were all scared off, and at this point, I finally had enough of Kayla. I couldn't believe she had been watching and stalking me secretly. Now, maybe not the best idea, but in front of my group of friends, I told her it was time for us to separate. To my surprise, she didn't cry, but she did laugh. And this was a laugh I could best compare to from what I'd heard of someone who was going crazy. Think of the final episode of Death Note, if you've ever seen it. When they find out that Light Yagami is Kira, he lets out this really crazy laugh. Maybe not as super exaggerated, but something along those lines. She then told me to go, you know what, to myself, before flipping me the bird and walking off. Myself and my friends just stood there more in shock at the fact that she had essentially no-sold, if you will, our breakup. Now, I hate to end this in such an anticlimactic ending, but after that afternoon, I never heard from Kayla again. It's like she moved to another country or something. It wasn't until about 5 to 6 months later, a mutual friend mentioned that Kayla had started seeing this guy, who had been in and out of jail for quite some time. Sad, really, but I was able to let go of that toxicity, and continued my college career. eventually graduating and moving out of my house. So, my friends, please stay safe. And if you're in a toxic relationship, take my advice. Don't let yourself get comfortable, because it's not worth it at the end of the day. At least, that's my opinion.